Pilgrimage. The fire was everywhere, a cyclone wrapping around him, filling his lungs, scorching his flesh. Bennett tried to locate the source, finding a concentrated dot on the horizon. As he fought toward it, it pulled him in, as though he were falling down a hill. The dot then grew, and he began to feel wrath inside it, the most potent he'd ever felt. In the sphere was a dark figure surrounded by a maelstrom of the essence of destruction. It turned to Bennett, its eyes blazing white, and he felt evil crawl under his skin, tearing his insides asunder. When he was finally able to cry out, the figure disappeared in a blinding nuclear flash. Bennett woke slumped on the short staircase in the shelter to a theater of chaos. The sensation of unbridled wrath continued to surround him, having followed him out of his dream. There was fire and smoke. The confirmation then came that he was no longer dreaming when he found Alex thrashing on the couch, screaming, "Save her!" so desperately his voice was crumbling. The teacher was still asleep, having his own nightmare, flame pouring out of not just his hands and forearms, but all of him. The couch underneath was scorched almost to cinders, while the blaze spread through the piles of trash in the room. Bennett sprang over, reaching for Alex's shoulders to shake him, but the flames scorched his hands like a chemical burn, forcing him away. "Wake up, man! You're having a nightmare!" he screamed. But Alex continued to writhe, dead asleep. Turning to call for help, Bennett was met with Hannah and her glistening eyes, already marching toward him, wearing a sleeveless undershirt and jeans. Immediately he ducked out of the way to keep from being bowled over, as the human celestial entered the flames, surrounded by a soft blue aura. She seized Alex's hands, interlocking their fingers. The connection hissed like a dozen pissed-off snakes. Crimson and cobalt blue light mixed, and the flames surged from Alex to Hannah, smooth as liquid, wrapping around her until she disappeared to Bennett's eyes. With a radical pop, the blaze blasted outward and dissipated. Nearly floored, Bennett snapped out of his daze and grabbed a blanket to beat at the flames spreading around the room. Hannah kept on Alex, gritting her teeth. Finally, his eyes opened, racing back and forth, revealing a man in terror with no concept of what was happening. His cries then dwindled, replaced with confused grunts and frenzied breaths. The fire engulfing the couch went out, and Alex was left completely naked. His hands and forearms, red-hot cinders, cooled gradually to the slightly more benign color of ash. Hannah then broke the connection of their hands, cracking like bark torn from a tree. Her chest heaved as she loomed over him, the energy radiating from her waning as Alex's normal skin tone returned. I'm sorry," he repeated in panic, clamping his eyes shut, sounding on the verge of tears. Bennett thrashed the last of the flames out, and the room became quiet, leaving only the crackle of dead fires and Alex's repeated apologies. The brief lull was then broken by Felix clamoring in from the kitchen. "Smoke! I see smoke! Wake up, everybody! Fire! Hey, guys!" Stomping into the room a moment later, half asleep and wielding a fire extinguisher backward, he said, "Oh, you already knew." Surveying the scene, he asked, "What happened? Everything okay? Why is Al naked?" Alex opened weak eyes and gazed up at Hannah. "Thank you." Without a word, she stepped away from the couch toward the bedroom hall, motioning to Felix. Get him some clothes and out of here before he lights up again. Felix tossed the extinguisher aside and found Alex a pair of jeans and a large black t-shirt among the junk piles. Okay, better? Come on, Wilbur. Some fresh air sounds pretty good. Know what I mean? I didn't mean to. It was an accident, Alex said, passing Bennett. Felix helped him up the stairs and out the front door. Nobody blames you, pal. They exited and the door slammed shut, leaving Bennett to survey the destruction and try to find some more clothes for Alex. The trash piles revealed a pair of socks and sneakers that would work, as well as no resting fires waiting to spring up. Feeling a section of cold, Bennett came upon Alex's blue baseball cap. A little singed, but otherwise okay. He stuffed it into his back pocket and stepped down the bedroom hall. Before Bennett could knock on the door, Hannah called from inside. Just come in. He opened the door cautiously to a bedroom looking much the same as the main living space. Nothing decorated the walls but wires and mold, and the floor was somewhere below in the mysterious depths of garbage. A large, let's say unkempt, mattress sat in the middle of it all. Hannah stepped out from a side door, probably a bathroom, putting on her leather jacket and fastening her silver belt buckle. Need something? She moved on to her heavy boots. Yeah. First, I took some shoes. Hope that's cool. And also, I want to apologize about that. Barker's doing the best he can to figure this shit out. So, just want you to know I'm sure he feels awful. Though saying it out loud makes me realize how stupid that is. When you're as old as me, you tend not to get attached to places and things. Take whatever you need. She finished lacing her boots and stood. The shit they put in him? I think it's starting to get to the guy, Bennett said. I've only known him for a little bit, but I can tell he's changing. You both are. I guess that's true. The changes are going to keep coming, which is why this needs to be done. Fast. Al thinks we're going home after it's done. But you know that's not true. Hannah didn't even try to mask it. Wasn't hard to figure out. We've got government scapegoat jobs on Earth, too. Felix would know. Lots of TV shows about him. Pretty sure he stopped watching TV about 40 years ago. But you're right. I know the tribunal. They'll use what they need to serve their purposes, then toss it aside. Sorry to say, but you'll both be put down when this is over. Sooner the better, in my opinion. Why? Bennett asked with a peaked eyebrow. Would you say he is fearful, your friend? I wouldn't call him my friend, but yeah, he's got issues. Guy's skittish. Worries about his asshole and everyone else's too much. Seems to live in constant anxiety. Hannah took a moment, scrunching her face like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Look, the quickest way to hatred is through fear, and the quickest way to fear is through sadness. The essence of destruction has buried itself in his heart by now, searching for anything it can latch onto, to use and grow. My guess is it found it already. Bennett considered her a moment. One of the Medolians said I was supposed to be the one taken to Eros and given wrath. Hannah didn't look surprised. It was probably assumed humans couldn't ignite pure Eve unless they carried similar shades to the wrath and rapture. I think Isaiah knew better and feared wrath would run rampant in you. So he She simply motioned at him. You're saying it was Isaiah who made the switch? No, I said probably. Bennett, stumped, blurted out. Al can never know. The truth? It would destroy him. I know you think you're protecting him, and you may be right. But in my experience, the truth always comes out. And the more it's held in, the more violently it does so. Bennett nodded. I get that, but he still can't know. Now, Hannah said, walking past him. Shall we? I have a favor to ask, Bennett said. She turned and waited. You're right. I can't use what's in me the same way Alex does. I want to fight. It's what I know. But I need something. Like what? Weapons. A gun. Some fucking nunchucks. I don't care. Whatever will help against Joseph and those desert horse fuckers. Hannah shook her head. Guns only inhibit rapture. Attacking from afar is the way of Phobos. That won't help you find your strength. Yeah, but I'd feel a lot better with a piece. Hannah's eyes narrowed. I get it. She looked over the sea of junk filling her room. Where is it? Ah. Stepping to a pile in the far corner, she plunged her hand in and returned it gripping a black leather knife sheath. She handed it to Bennett. He pulled it out for a once-over. A full-tang Bowie-style knife with a 9-inch clip blade. The handle looked to be made of ivory, but with more sheen, and featured marbled streaks of black and gray. He had never seen a more beautiful knife in his life. Will this suffice? She asked. He felt like a kid on Christmas. Where did you get it? Don't remember. Just be careful with it. Hang on to it, she answered, finally leaving the room. Yes, ma'am. Bennett sheathed the blade. He followed Hannah to the surface, where Felix and Alex were waiting. The morning sun had risen, radiating off the golden fields as birds resting on the silos overhead sang. A soft breeze came from the east, stirring the tall grass. Bennett found Alex slumped over himself on the ground, refusing to look Hannah's way, wearing his shame on his sleeve. Bennett handed Alex the shoes, socks, and his blue baseball cap. Found your hat. Lucky. Gotta keep better track of this thing, Al. The teacher took it without glancing at Bennett, put it on, and replied, Like a little asshole. Thanks. At her instruction, the group gathered around and put their hands on Hannah's shoulders. She told Alex and Bennett to think of where they last saw Joseph and the Raytheon camp. Any detail would help. Closing her eyes, she stayed silent a long moment as Bennett struggled to keep his thoughts on the camp, Joseph, and the Raytheons, finding himself simply dreading the fact that they were about to shift. I think I have something. Hold on, Hannah said. A moment later, the blinding light wrapped around them. God, I hate this part. And the queasy feeling in Bennett's gut came rushing back as the group sped through time and space. Soon he was struck by the smell of horse manure, rotten meat, and campfire smoke as his feet landed on hard, dry dirt. A high desert sun was pouring heat onto his head and shoulders. The landscape around them was overgrown with gray, dead trees and brown grass, similar to, but not quite the same as where they had been imprisoned by the Raytheons. Bennett's view was of wide open desert, almost peaceful, But Alex's and Felix's faces, pointed the other way, told a very different story, with eyes snapped wide in surprise. Not 10 yards from them sat a Raythian camp. The 9 riders occupying it looked just as surprised to see them as they were. 5 animal hide tents rested near a fire, where a dead animal,
possibly a horse? Can't tell,
was roasting on a boorish pike. On the far side, 7 living horses were tied to 2 dead trees that were providing minimal shade for the animals, and a rust-covered, custom jeep of some type beside them. It took the Raythians no time to grab their weapons and mobilize on the newcomers, baring their teeth and blades, shouting war cries.
"Well, we found him,"
Felix said.
"Guess my aim was better than I thought,"
Hannah said.
"Put them down before they can call the others."
Bennett smiled, feeling relief.
"Finally, speaking my language."
The Raythians swarmed from all sides, sending he and Alex instinctively back to back.
"Light it up, Al,"
Bennett said.
"You can stop telling me what to do whenever,"
Alex muttered, as Bennett heard his hands spark and release smoke. The soldier pulled Hannah's knife from its sheath, feeling much more comfortable now that he had a trustworthy weapon in hand. Turning it upside down in his grip, he bared his teeth.
"Round 2. Let's go."
The first wave approached. A young Raythian charged in with good speed, but terrible balance, and Bennett was able to grab his spear and use the momentum to send him lateral. In one swift move, he raked the knife's serrated blade across the man's ribs and sent the rider sprawling. A long, jagged blade came down on Bennett's head, which he stopped with the knife, just as a long spear fired at his gut, forcing him to break away from Alex. He charged the bladed Raythian and leapt away just as the spear wielder returned to impale him, instead sinking his weapon deep into his fellow tribeswoman's chest. She dropped, dead, and Bennett sliced the back of his knees, sending the spear wielder to the dirt. The Raythian roared and moved to retaliate, but Bennett was ready and silenced the brute with his blade. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Hannah marching undaunted into the throng, but lost track of her. Alex was crying out behind him, flailing like an amateur, while Felix had snagged a rock the size of a softball and begun pummeling Raythians over the head, leaving them sprawled in his wake.
"Weirdest fucking demon."
But Bennett couldn't focus on the others, as he had fallen into a test of strength with the largest of the camp's Raythians. His knife had been lost, knocked out of his grip by the behemoth, and they were now struggling for control of the Raythian's spear. Bennett's confidence began to wane as his gain drifted.
"Shit. Not good. Help?"
The Raythian was seconds from overpowering him. He fought for a plan.
"Nope."
The huge man hurled Bennett to the ground and lifted the spear over his head. Bennett winced, readying for the worst, when the Raythian's eyes went wide with fright. His jaw quaked as though he were fighting for breath, and the spear fell from his hands. Bennett jolted back when the giant's bare chest turned a deep shade of gray and raw umber that radiated outward like a shockwave, extending to his neck, elbows, and thighs. Cracks formed as the dark mass solidified, and whatever parts of the Raythian were still made of flesh went as limp as a rag doll. He collapsed to the sand with a heavy thud, revealing Hannah behind him, an open palm out, radiating a vivid blue. The Raythian's expression was frozen in place, mouth open. Hannah stepped over him and held out a hand for Bennett, who was in as much shock as the Raythian.
"Well, maybe not that much."
He recognized the substance the Raytheon had been transmuted to. It was the same he'd created in his father's office the night the wings appeared.
Was starting to think I dreamed all that.
Thin green and purple vines wormed out of the cracks in the Raytheon's rock chest, sprouting white-petaled flowers with brilliant yellow and violet pistils.
Thanks,
Bennett said, squeaking on accident. Hannah helped him to his feet.
Don't mention it.
Was that rapture? He asked. She nodded with a slight smile.
That was rapture.
The fight was waning. All of the Raytheons were down, save two. A young male with a wide triangular nose, pale skin, and dark hair had seen Hannah's punch turn the biggest of them into half a statue, and thus was making a frantic run for open desert. Felix stepped up beside Bennett and Hannah, rock still in hand.
I got him.
Hurling the stone high and far, it soared and came down directly on the young man's head, who dropped and didn't get up.
Bullseye!
Felix shouted. They turned to find the last remaining Raytheon locked in combat with Alex, swinging a large blade, trying to fend him off. She was lanky, with long blonde hair, and wore a patch of leather over her mouth. Alex attacked with fierce swings, his burning fists glancing off the blade, sending sparks flying. Deep blue and gray veins protruded from his skin, flushed terracotta red everywhere but his lower arms, which were charred and blackened. With one punch, he sent her flailing, and the blade to the ground.
Stop him,
Hannah said to Bennett.
We need one alive.
Bennett charged in, reaching Alex just as he began battering the defeated Raytheon, and tackled him away. Next thing he knew, Bennett was holding on for dear life, trying to slip a hold on the thrashing teacher, who was reacting like a wild animal caught in a trap.
Let me go! Let me go!
Alex screamed.
Chill out. You got her,
Bennett shouted. But Alex, fighting for freedom, didn't seem to hear. Felix arrived to help Bennett contain him, taking hold of Alex's wrists and shouting,
That's enough now, Wilbur!
After a moment, the teacher's fight died down, and he was left panting. Bennett kept his hold until Alex's body relaxed, and the fires on his hands and forearms dwindled.
Let go, Bennett,
Alex said sharply, but Bennett held firm.
I said let me go,
the teacher shouted, finally wrenching free and rolling away. Standing, he marched away from the camp with clenched, smoking fists. Felix went after him and put his arm around Alex, saying something Bennett couldn't make out. Lying on the ground for a moment, catching his breath, Bennett nursed the burns he'd sustained trying to hold Alex. Thankfully, they were already healing themselves.
Some of this rapture stuff ain't so bad.
Finally standing, he approached Hannah looming over the blonde Raytheon, who was spouting what could have only been curses in their ancient language, judging by her tone.
What's she saying?
He asked, now side by side with Hannah.
It isn't nice,
she answered with a chuckle.
This one thinks I don't understand her.
That language of theirs sure is pretty, Bennett remarked.
The old speech of the Molochs. Yeah, it's like German's angrier, creepier stepbrother.
I don't get it. Who are these people? How did they get like this? Bennett asked. Are they some ancient tribe none of us knew about?
This one was speaking Portuguese a moment ago. That one over there was screaming in Russian.
Hannah pointed about the camp. Raythians are everyday people, just like you and Barker. Human minds are easy to influence, and the Raythian cause can appeal to lost souls. The Molochs thrived on it. The tribes of old were the ones who felt civilization was growing too fast, progressing too quickly. They worshipped destruction, and so, the wrath. I never thought modern people could fall this far, but it's not the first time I was wrong, Hannah said. The Raythian woman continued erupting in anger, spitting at Hannah and Bennett. We need to figure out what they're doing out here, Hannah said, kneeling to address her. Selbrin Sulios, Ra, Kylo Ra. The Raythian's arrogant smile was swept away, and her eyes became dire and desperate. There, now you get it. Hannah turned to Bennett. Give us a moment alone. Bennett stepped away and found Alex leaning on the Jeep. Felix was behind him, rubbing his shoulders like a boxing coach, speaking softly. As Bennett neared, his words became clear. This was put in you, but it's not you. The wrath responds to a desire to dismantle. So, don't desire it. Alex was clenching the Jeep doors, digging his fingers into the frame. You said that, but it hurts. I can't stop myself. When it hits, it's like there's nothing I can do. Buddy, I've been living with this shit a lot longer than you. It don't have to control you, Felix said with a southern twang. The voices are so loud. They want me to... God, the things they want, Alex moaned. Been there, if you know what I mean, Felix said, giving Bennett the back off signal before he arrived. Thank you, Alex said to Felix. When he caught Bennett staring, he countered with a sneer. Anything I can do for you? Bennett raised his hands and backed off. I'm good. No, come on, breathe. Hannah screamed a few yards away, gripping the blonde Raythian's collar, shaking her. Open your throat, damn it! She slapped the woman across the face, which was turning ghostly pale. Bennett charged over to help. What's happening? The Raythian's cocky smile returned as her head drifted back and eyes rolled over. Her body went limp, and Hannah shoved her down, standing with a frustrated huff. I hate it when they do that. Is she dead? Felix asked, kneeling next to the Raythian. He lifted her wrist and dropped her arm into the dirt. Super dead? What did you do? Nothing. She suffocated herself, Hannah answered. You can do that? Alex asked. Solves the debate of whether these are authentic Raythians or not, Hannah said, marching back toward the camp. Felix stayed on her heels. Did you get anything useful? Hannah searched the Raythian's side pouches. Mostly gibberish. Said the third lord is coming, or something. Also mentioned a congregation. I think these guys were on their way to meet friends. She motioned at tire tracks leading toward the camp, made by the Jeep. They were going this way. She then pointed in the direction the riders were traveling. And what do you know? There just happens to be an assortment of wrath gathering over there. She pocketed one of the small bloodstones from a Raythian pouch. An assortment of wrath? What does that mean? Bennett asked. Let's go find out, Hannah said. If Bennett didn't know better, He'd swear there was a tinge of excitement in her voice. Subtle, but there.
Okay, let's do it,
Felix enthusiastically agreed. Hannah ripped a pair of leather undergarments off a male Raytheon. Not going anywhere looking like that. She tossed them at Felix, who smelled them, gagging in dismay.
You're not serious.
I am, Hannah said with her most genuine grin yet. 20 minutes later, the party was stripped of their normal clothes and had assumed the identities of mangy desert riders. The only member of the party who showed signs of nervousness at the thought of disrobing was Alex, who made sure to cover his indecency with an animal skin as he did so. Felix, on the other hand, was naked far faster than Bennett's wandering eyes had expected him to be, and took some time to stretch in the nude before fully assuming the Raytheon guise. Using the camp's stash of white paint, the party drew similar designs on their own skin, and by the end looked quite convincing. But after just a few minutes, Bennett was already queasy from the smell.
Can't imagine how Al is doing with all this. Seems like the type of guy who bathes in bleach.
You sure this is going to work? He asked, adjusting and picking leather with dried, crusty blood out of his ass crack. Depends on how well we all play the part, Hannah said. Having collected all the bloodstones in the camp, one by one she crushed them in hand, leaving just 3 intact. These she distributed to Alex, Bennett's, and Felix's satchels. Don't touch it, she said to Bennett.
No problem.
Felix, Barker, let the horses go. It's time to leave. After gathering all useful items from the horses' saddle packs, Felix and Alex cut their ties and let them go free. As the 7 animals galloped away, kicking up golden dirt, Hannah whistled as loudly and piercingly as a cornet. Not you, Buster. The horse leading the charge, a black stallion with streaks of white across its middle and near its hooves, took a sharp turn and returned to the camp. Marching to Hannah, it stopped and lowered its head. Hey there, pretty, she said, sliding a hand up the side of its face, petting its nose. She whispered something Bennett couldn't hear to the animal, then leapt onto its back and took the reins. Let's do it. The others proceeded to the jeep, already packed with their clothes, but when Felix took the driver's seat, Bennett and Alex shared a weary glance. Bennett slid into the passenger seat, and Alex hopped into the back. As expected, it smelled awful.
Did they slaughter their goats in here? Peow!
Felix said, putting the keys into the ignition. You do know how to drive, right? Bennett asked.
Do I know how to drive? Let me tell you something, young man.
Felix turned the key. The engine roared to life, choked, and immediately returned a blunt, dead sound.
Wait, which one is the throttle again?
The Jeep took a couple more tries to get up and running, but soon they were traversing grassy desert terrain, trying to keep up with Hannah and her stallion. Thankfully, the stink of the car was reduced once they got going. As the day grew long, the landscape became rugged, full of rocky outcrops, gray bushes, and dead trees both standing and fallen. As they reached the top of one particularly high embankment, Hannah brought her horse to a stop. Felix pulled up next to her, giving the Jeep's horn a honk.
What's up, Buttercup?
Hannah dismounted, instructed the steed to stay, and marched toward the edge of a cliff. What's she doing? Alex asked. Felix shrugged.
Beats me. Taking a look at something with those high-wind peepers of hers. She could probably pass an eye test from here to the moon.
Sounds like she's pretty much infallible, Bennett said with a hint of bitterness. You sure she's not an angel?
Nobody's perfect, my man. Know what I mean?
Felix said, his voice turning to a dull whisper.
There are cracks, even in her. Believe me. And it's getting harder, you know? To watch them get wider and deeper. Nothing quite like witnessing a person you care so desperately about go down a path you know is going to break them. Know what I mean?
Felix's lips caught his words just before he choked up. Bennett wasn't quite sure what he was referring to, but guessed it had something to do with the drink he'd tried to deny Hannah the night before.
Heard similar things from Lance when he asked me to quit. Like him. I didn't.
At the cliff edge, Hannah motioned for Bennett to join her. Hunter. Hopping out of the Jeep, he hurried to meet her, staring across the horizon as a welcome, refreshing breeze blew over them. Despite being incredibly sick of the desert, he was well aware of how beautiful the sight was. Signal's getting strong. Can you feel it? She asked. Bennett closed his eyes but couldn't sense anything. Don't think so. Try. Feel it. Celestial sight isn't just about seeing Eve. You'll see everything, but first you have to expand your own perception. Was that Buddha or Garcia? Bennett asked with a smirk. Joke's on you, asshole. One of the few things I like about humanity is Jer-Bear. That guy's soul was nothing but rapture and jubilee. Just wanted to create and spread joy. You have to need that same rapture and somehow make the need a part of your goal. The energy will give it to you once you know what that is. As long as your purpose is true, able to stand in the light, the rapture will respond. What do you mean, true? To defend something that has no defenses. To build something not yet built. To help those who are most in need. To be truly honest with oneself. This is what it responds to. Raw emotion is Eve, so use what's inside of you. Ever had someone you cared for? Or who cared for you? The past rushed back. The family photo in the gas station office, and the ripped face of Bennett's older brother.
Always loving. Just like Garcia.
Then, the face of his father took center stage. Tony, with his wide nose, slanted eyes, and curly ear hair. As always, his hateful diatribes erupted in Bennett's mind.
His special little insults for all of us. Ways to feel like a big man. I got it pretty bad. So did Mom. But Jer had it worse. Always did. Nothing in this world scared Dad more than his own gay son.
Shoving the memories down, as he always did, the soldier shook his head. Once. Hannah studied him. Don't push away your humanity, especially now. Remember, even though you got this from us. She put a hand on her chest, then pointed at his. First, we got it from you. The essence of creation comes from humans, too. You've always had a little bit in you. You just didn't know it. But people like us, soldiers, we tear things down, Bennett said. We don't create. Can you be true if all you know is the fight? Right. The violence paradox. It's a doozy, but worth thinking about. Let me ask you, is it evil to strike a nail with a hammer? Obviously a violent act, yeah, but necessary. If a fight is in your way on a path, the path for true creation, rapture will help you end the conflict. How you end it is up to you. Your counterpart Barker would be strong with it because he only has one unselfish goal. Just because he's small doesn't mean he doesn't have strength. His potential is, well, it's there. Believe it or not.
That's true. Al's a good guy. But what if I'm not?
She turned a curious gaze his way. What do you mean?
I'm not here for unselfish reasons. I'm here because of a mistake. I'm here because I
Offed yourself? Hearing her say it made Bennett feel hundreds of pounds heavier.
never thought of it in those words.
How did you? He began. Call it a well-educated guess.
Meaning it takes one to know one?
No, meaning I'm good at guessing games. You know, just because I was a celestial doesn't mean I can't understand what it's like to be human. I've been around. Hannah grew quiet, taking in the view, and Bennett wanted to move on.
Could an angel even be suicidal? How could they go about killing themselves? You know what? Never mind. Look, all I know is someone gave me a mission, and
You're going to see it done. She finished for him.
it's what I know. The mission. But now, thinking back, I'm not sure I ever knew what I was fighting for. In any of it. Not like Jer, anyways.
Jer?
My older brother, Jerry. He died in '90, during a raid. South America. Some special ops mission. Hostage situation. I'm still not sure. But he was everything a soldier is supposed to be. Totally pure, caring only for the well-being of those around him. Basically, everything I'm not. He used to tell me, just do what good you can, King Arthur. But I never did. It's like I thought that because he was around, or because he was overseas fighting for us, everything would be okay. If anyone said anything bad about the military or anything I considered a representation of him, I would fight them. It's all I did. Always fighting with something or someone. Jer would have been ashamed of me if he knew. And I'm still doing it. Still fighting. Still following orders. And I'm not sure why.
Hannah put a firm hand on his shoulder. Then that's what you're going to have to find out.
What do you mean?
Whatever it is you're fighting for.
Hey, guys!
They turned to see Felix waving, standing from the jeep.
I think I know which way to go!
He called, pointing to a thin line of smoke rising in the distance.
Don't gotta have angel eyes to see that!
15 minutes later, they were speeding down a sandy slope toward the smoke. When they reached the top of yet another ridge, Bennett became aware of sharp flashes of light from one of the distant hills.
Felix, stop. Someone's out there,
he said. The party halted and looked in the direction he motioned to. More flashes appeared on the hill, less than a mile away.
Someone's talkative,
Felix said. There's about 20 of them. Hannah rode the stallion alongside the jeep, snapping the rear view mirror off the passenger door to reflect a response. Felix let out a cowardly laugh.
Hope you didn't just tell them to come kill us.
Nah, they look amenable. And ugly. She tossed the mirror into the back of the jeep. More flashes returned, then ceased. Hannah covered her mouth with a leather mask. They're headed this way. This is it. Barker, Hunter, cover up the scars. Bennett and Alex put on additional layers of hide to cover the bull head and wings as the group continued on. Soon, a pair of 4x4s and a group of riders on horseback were visible, merging with their heading. Play the part, Hannah said, as the real Raythians drew close. Bennett pulled his leather hood low and studied them. They, like the others, were a vast mixture of races, without a dominant size or shape, yet they all seemed deadly in their own right. Most rode their mounts like old pros, with custom weapons in hand, as though always ready for battle. Felix slowed the jeep in order to follow them into the valley and a ravine, which quickly drew in tighter.
One behind us, too,
he said. Bennett turned and spotted another 4x4 following their path, careening down the gully after them. The party in the rear caught up, soon passing the group led by Hannah. The 6 Raythians stared questioningly as they roared ahead into the approaching canyon.
This is starting to seem like a bad idea,
Felix said. The sun was soon setting, blanketing the sky with a furious mix of red and orange as they drove for miles along the canyon. Hannah tapped Felix. Speed up. You're drawing attention to us.
I know what you mean.
He put the car in second gear, racing to keep pace. A few minutes later, 2 more 4x4s and a dozen horse riders joined from an intersecting canyon. They were surrounded by galvanized Raythians charging as fast as they could, hollering and hyping themselves for something they seemed to be in the know about. Figuring,
What the hell?
Bennett joined in, yapping like a dog into the air, immediately drawing a worried glance from Alex.
Let it out. Why not?
Bennett suggested. Alex's stern guise surprisingly melted. He grinned, turned his head up, and howled, joining Bennett, and soon Felix did as well. The 3 screamed and shouted for minutes on end, letting off some steam, though the teacher was clearly the one who needed it most, as he was the last to finish, looking as relaxed as though he'd gotten a massage afterwards. The horde of riders continued to exclaim their excitement for another 10 minutes as the sun dipped below the horizon and the caravan came over a hill. The canyon suddenly opened into a plateau valley. Below them lay a sprawling Raythian camp, with well over 200 tents silhouetted by the sunset, somewhere north of 200 horses, and at least 3 times as many desert riders.
Ladies and gentlemen, we found the hive,
Felix said as the jeep dipped into the valley and toward the camp. Hannah rode up close alongside them. We'll be okay. Remember, we're just here to look around. And if either of you 2 spot Joseph, let us know as silently as possible. Felix and I will take care of the rest.
What do you mean?
Bennett asked.
You said it's our job to.
Hunter, don't argue with me, she said. Bennett sat back in his seat. You ready? She asked all 3 in the jeep. Felix screamed one last time, answering for them.
We're ready!
Hannah stared Alex down. Barker, keep the wrath in check. Don't blow our cover. I can't shift us out of there if we're caught in a storm of Raythians. The teacher nodded and slunk lower in his seat. As the Raythian train entered the camp, Bennett noticed many of the tents scattered about were made of industrial material, much more modern than the rest, which were mostly sewn together from various cloths, likely pillaged, and cuts of animal hide. Passing into the outskirts of the camp, they found contemporary camping chairs, pieces of furniture chopped into firewood, and many tents containing spring cots.
Must have been an engineering camp, or dig site, or something. One guess what happened to all the poor fucks here.
The Raythians had fires going and were clumped in packs along the plateau, either giving oratories or listening to them while eating. A small hill sat at the far end of the camp, upon which the largest tent was built. Across the valley, another canyon began, where a steady stream of Raythians was flowing in on foot. Hannah found an open spot in a clump of tents to dismount as Felix pulled the jeep alongside her and killed the engine.
So far, so good.
The sky was a dark blue and purple by now, as the group of invaders in disguise made their way through the tents left by the original camp, looking for clues. Many had been burned to the ground. The rest were well rifled through.
Any sign of Joseph?
Felix asked Bennett, glancing around.
Trust me, you'll know him if you see him.
A loud horn somewhere overhead broke the noise of the camp, echoing through the canyons on either side of them. The desert riders stopped their speeches and turned silent, now like statues staring upward with eyes that did not waver. Bennett followed their gazes and found the source of the sound, an old Raythian male in a long white cloak, perched upon a high stone at the mouth of the far canyon, where the procession was continuing. He blew the horn again, held with both hands. The old Raythian then disappeared behind the rock. Nearly silent, the rest of the camp began emptying into the far canyon, following the man in robes.
Just when I thought you guys couldn't get any weirder.
A wave of Raythians marched toward Bennett and the others, forcing them onward like fish caught in a net. There was nowhere to go. With one look, Hannah made it clear that they would have to follow along.
Yay!
Bennett walked alongside the riders, hoping he was covering the wings on his shoulders well enough. Surprisingly, his other tattoos were not a problem, as many of the Raythians had them as well, ranging everywhere from genuine tribal and prison tattoos to mottos and pop culture references. A few moments into the trek, Hannah suddenly held her head and let out a groan.
You okay?
Felix asked. Yeah, we're nearing a lot of wrath. Bennett could feel it too. A faint storm cloud of crimson was fast approaching. The march continued for 10 minutes, and they soon found themselves at the mouth of a cave. Many Raythians were handed torches as they entered, which lit their way through the cramped tunnel. For another half hour, the parade moved deeper into the mountain, and eventually came upon a wide room with a red cresting roof and black stairs leading up to a tall, open doorway. 2 weathered gargoyles were at the base of the long stepped stairs, which looked similar to Chinese dragons, but far uglier. Felix and Hannah shared a curious glance, and Bennett swore he heard Hannah whisper, "Friend of yours?" while Felix held in a spit of laughter. Climbing the steps with the horde, they entered the doorway, passing into a dark hall.
This feels fucking wrong.
A brief walk led to a passage through a rock entry, where the walls exploded upward into a new cavern. An orange hue from the few torches hung inside was cast on its black and brown walls. The main feature of the room, a statue of an immense beast looming atop the plateau of a large column, commanded Bennett's attention. Covered in boils and spikes, with no eyes, the statue featured colossal wings spread out over the room like immense sails. The noise of the Raythians inside forced Bennett's senses into overdrive, distracting him, and causing him to stumble when the ground suddenly gave way where intricate trenches were chiseled into the floor. By now, the room was filled to capacity with desert riders, who were letting out low, guttural sounds, rising and pulsing, almost hymn-like. Bennett and the others made their own noises for conformity's sake, catching a few odd glances from nearby Raythians.
God, I hope I'm doing this right.
Buh.
Hi, how are you?
Bah. A figure in white appeared at the top of the plateau, a Raythian woman, aged near 60, with stark white hair, wearing robes similar to the hornblower. She wielded a torch in her left hand, raising it high above the mass as the Raythian chants reached a fever pitch. Out of the shadows behind her stepped a naked male Raythian covered in blood. The crowd roared, apparently in approval. Based on the manic look on his face, Bennett guessed the blood covering him wasn't his own. The naked Raythian held his arms high, proudly, as the woman in robes approached him and pressed the torch into his chest. The naked Raythian roared, enraged, as his skin boiled, yet he did not fight back. In fact, he, as well as the crowd, seemed rather to enjoy it. After a moment, she lifted the torch, and he dropped to his knees. Stepping to the edge of the platform, she motioned behind her, where 3 more shapes appeared from the darkness below the beast. The 2 on the outside were Raythians, as large as the one Hannah had turned to stone, carrying a third party between them. Another naked man, free from blood. His head hung low, who had no white markings or tattoos on him. The man's head lifted weakly, and when he saw the horror below him, he began screaming desperately in English.
Help! Somebody!
Bennett and Hannah shared a worried glance.
Shit. A civilian. Must be one of the people from the original camp. What do we do?
But her expression, looking as though she were ready to watch and wait, gave him no comfort. The blood-covered Raythian was handed a dagger by the woman in white and held it over the crowd, rousing them.
This looks familiar. Things are about to get ugly.
Watching an innocent man go through the torture he and Alex had at the hands of these maniacs sounded excruciating. And at the thought, Bennett felt a new, crackling cold run up his spine and set itself in the scars on his shoulders. The civilian man was held in place by the brutes as the wild, naked Raythian proceeded to beat him, cut him, and do all his worst, all while his clan's people called for more.
We have to do something!
Bennett took a step forward, feeling his spine straighten and an austere strength spill into his chest. Rapture filled him like a glass of water expanding as it froze. But before he could move, Hannah's hand shot out and gripped his wrist, stopping him. "No, we have to wait for Joseph," she whispered. Bennett fought her grip and felt her tighten like a vice.
He's going to die!
Watching the civilian man go limp and hearing his shouts cease, Bennett's wings turned so cold it burned, and his fists began to feel as heavy as ice blocks. He looked down and saw a faint fog of orchid blue appearing at his fingertips. The civilian held by the brutes went still, dead. The blood-covered Raythian was done. The victim's body was then taken to the edge of the plateau and tossed over the side, where he disappeared from Bennett's view.
I've seen enough.
The soldier was finally understanding what Hannah had told him about on the cliff.
Got a pretty good idea of what I'm fighting for.
But she would not relent her grip on his wrists, able to keep him in place even with his newfound strength. Felix whispered at Bennett in slight panic.
Chill out! You want to get us killed?
In his peripheral vision, Bennett caught nearby Raythians taking notice, starting a murmur among the crowd. Meanwhile, the brutes on the upper plateau brought out a new victim. A woman somewhere in her 30s, brunette, fairly short, also stripped of all clothing, except for her glasses.
No! No more!
Bennett bared his teeth at Hannah. Let me go! She remained firm. I'm not going to do that. The blood-covered Raytheon made another display to the crowd, holding up the dagger as the woman screamed for help. Bennett felt it coming, an even bigger wave of rapture than the night the wings had appeared on him.
This is it! Come on! I'm ready!
He was more than willing to fight off Hannah, charge up the stairs, and stop the ceremony. Bennett gritted his teeth, just about to make his move, when a wave of wrath assaulted his senses, and a sharp bang echoed over the cavern. An explosion blasted the 5'5" frame of Alex Barker 20 yards up, and everything else nearby to the floor. The teacher's fists were glowing red hot as he shot toward the plateau like a flaming lawn dart, releasing pure rage.